Your cell phone is more powerful than the onboard computers on the Apollo moon missions, and I'm not exaggerating. In fact, it's more effective. The so-called Apollo mainframe has just over 4 megabytes of RAM, used to store temporary data, and only 75 kilobytes of core memory, permanent computer memory. When you compare these numbers to any smartphone today, no matter how simple it is, it sounds like a joke. However, with these rather modest specs, it would be possible to fly the spacecraft to the moon multiple times and return everyone safely to Earth. But how can a device like today pack thousands of times the computing power into an incredibly small structure that can fit in your pocket? The answer to this question lies in a tiny object that sparked an unprecedented technological revolution. I'm talking about semiconductor chips. But to understand what these chips are, we first need to understand what a semiconductor actually is. You need to know that some materials are good conductors of electricity, such as gold, silver, copper and aluminum. These are all good examples. They have more free electrons, i.e. electrons 1s2 2s2 2p6 in the valence shell. Who remembers that? This allows charges to move through these materials more easily and without much resistance. On the other hand, some materials are less conductive, such as glass, rubber, silicone, and ceramics. In these cases, the electrons are tightly bound to the nucleus, so these substances are insulators. They prevent electric charges from passing through. In between these two extremes are those materials with intermediate conductivities, meaning they can act as both insulators and conductors. These materials are called semiconductors, of which silicon and germanium are the most important. Silicon is primarily used in the electronics industry because it can withstand high temperatures and is more readily available in nature because it is a common element, similar to grains of sand. In a very real sense, silicon is obtained from certain types of sand. This element is so important in the production of semiconductor chips that the U.S. state of California, home to the world's largest technology companies, is called Silicon Valley. A chip essentially consists of a wafer, a multi-layer biscuit. Just kidding. In electronics, a wafer is actually a thin slice of semiconductor material on which microcircuit is placed. These circuits are patterned, and the flow of electricity is controlled by transistors, which act like tiny switches. They open and close, allowing or blocking the flow of electricity. In fact, semiconductor chips are now found in more than just computers and cell phones. Almost all modern products use these components. You're sure to find them in your area. Your charger, your TV, your air conditioner, your microwave, the intercontinental ballistic missiles used to deliver nuclear bombs are all filled with chips. Escape is impossible. People already have chips implanted in almost everything, except in places that don't make sense, like vaccines. But what many people don't know is that this technology that is so important today originated decades ago. The first semiconductor chips, developed in the 1950s, had 4 transistors, or 4 tiny switches that controlled the flow of electricity. This amount has increased over the years. Technological advances made it possible to develop chips with 8 transistors, then 16, 32, and so on, until today, microchips have 114 billion transistors. Not thousands, not millions, but billions, with beat switches each frantically transferring its zeros and ones onto a chip the size of a fingernail, or if you have a nail-biting habit, is slightly larger. In order to fit so many resistors into such a small component, they have to be very close to each other, very close. This is a distance that cannot be measured in centimeters or millimeters. To simplify the measurement, we need to use nanometers, which are 1 billion parts per meter. For example, a human hair is about 100,000 nanometers long, and in today's most advanced chips, the distance between transistors is 2 nanometers. This is similar to the size of a DNA strand. As you can imagine, to build such a chip we need cutting-edge technology and highly innovative equipment running in extremely modern factories. These factories are so specialized that they even have their own name, called fabs. These are tightly controlled environments. People who work there must wear special clothing because every speck of dust can stop chip production and cause significant losses to these factories. They rely on resources so advanced that few companies in the world today are capable of producing such chips. The so-called photolithography machine, that is, the chip manufacturing process, essentially depends on the two companies TSMC and ASML. What these company names lack in creativity, they make up for in their global significance. These two brands are probably the most important in your daily life that you have never heard of. The story that led us to this situation begins in the United States, where chip manufacturing dominated during the Cold War. This technology was initially targeted at military and space technology purposes. The chips were sold primarily to the US government, but leading entrepreneurs soon recognized the vast potential of semiconductors and realized that civilian use of these chips in personal computers could revolutionize the world and make them a lot of money. The United States then encouraged the establishment of chip factories in Eastern countries where labor was cheaper. But these countries quickly realized that they could create their own companies, and that's exactly what happened. One of them is TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which was founded in the 1980s. It is currently the world's largest chip manufacturer. As of the end of 2022, the company controlled 58% of the global market share, far ahead of second-place Samsung, which held 6% of the market share. The market capitalization exceeds $400 billion. TSMC is one of the 15 most valuable companies in the world and produces some of the most advanced chips in the world today. In fact, even if you don't know it, there's a good chance your phone has a chip made by TSMC. The company is so important that it is at the center of a geopolitical crisis between two world powers, the United States and China. Taiwan was once part of China, but broke away from Beijing when Communist Mao Zedong came to power. Today, the small landmass geographically close to China has closer trade ties with the United States. The United States has even reached an agreement with TSMC to build a factory in the United States, which is expected to be completed in 2025. The White House has also imposed a series of business bans on Chinese companies to support local manufacturers. However, these U.S. sanctions not only affect U.S. companies, but also companies in other countries that trade with China. Among them, another company I mentioned earlier is ASML. Advanced Semiconductors Materials Lithography is a Dutch company that produces chip-making machines. This is such a special and advanced business that no other company in the world can do this. Each lithography machine manufactured by ASML weighs 180 tons and costs nearly $1 billion. Not surprisingly, it is the fourth most valuable company in Europe, with a market capitalization of $250 billion. However, due to threats from the US government, ASML announced a few months ago that it would restrict the export of its machines to China. All these restrictions have created a series of uncertainties for chip production and global sales, and have also exacerbated crises caused by other causes. One of the main reasons is the pandemic. Like other economic sectors, the global lithography industry has been directly affected by the virus, with many factories forced to close for long periods of time. In this case, the situation is made even worse as the pandemic coincides with increased demand for tech products. There are other causes of the semiconductor crisis, including the war between Russia and Ukraine, which poses a long-term threat. That's because Ukraine produces about 70% of the world's neon, a gas used in the production of semiconductor chips. You know the saying, when it rains, it pours. Well, a lack of sand may be exacerbating the crisis. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, silicon is extracted from a specific type of sand, but its predatory extraction has caused severe environmental damage, even changing the courses of Sri Lankan rivers and causing the disappearance of small islands. In addition, other natural problems intersect with the chip production path. In recent years, Taiwan has suffered its worst drought in decades, affecting semiconductor production because the process requires large amounts of water. Even factory fires in Japan caused losses in global chip supplies. All these factors combined have real consequences. Volkswagen, for example, was unable to source semiconductors and had to stop its assembly lines to inspect its factories. Chips are used not just in electric cars but in nearly every vehicle manufactured today. They are found in electronic control panels, power windows, automatic locks, but the damage caused by missing chips affects more than just the automotive market. During the current crisis, 73% of electronics companies have been affected by parts shortages. To prevent these problems from happening again, some countries are investing in chip production in-house to reduce reliance on this complex supply chain involving many countries. This is crucial not only for economic reasons, but also from a scientific perspective. Finally, countries seeking sovereignty and independence must invest in technology, which even affects national security. Remember how I mentioned that even rockets that can cross oceans use these chips? For example, if a country relies on another country's technology to develop weapons, that means it is completely vulnerable to threats from the enemy. Even in matters that are far more important than war, or at least should be, investment in such technology is critical. This is the case, for example, in the health sector. Modern medical devices are based on semiconductors. The same applies to the environment. Devices that monitor deforestation and forest fires also require chips to function. This is an established fact in education. Imagine the role this technology can play in distance learning, computing, robotics, and other learning-related activities. Even within the culture, watching movies at home, listening to music through speakers, and even playing video games with friends are all activities that are made possible thanks to these gadgets. I could list many other areas where semiconductor chips are critical. But you are undoubtedly aware of their importance in our daily lives. It's hard to imagine what our lives would be like today without the ability to squeeze so much processing and data storage capacity into just a few centimeters. You wouldn't be watching this video without semiconductors. So with the chip you can not only watch that video but also enjoy it. Share it with your friends and leave a comment under other topics you would like to see on the channel. Thank you and see you next time.